For the last several months, President Trump has changed global trade as we know it, striking major deals with key trading partners. But on the eve of his next deadline before higher tariffs take effect, a federal court is hearing arguments on whether his tariffs are even legal. Fox's Rebecca Castor has all the details from Washington.
So far, President Trump says he's winning the trade war using aggressive tariffs to strong-arm countries into better trading practices, all while avoiding major inflation.
Critics said that our tariffs would hurt the economy, but the data shows the exact opposite.
In 4 months, he's secured trade deals with countries like the United Kingdom, Japan, and the EU, with South Korea being the latest announced on Wednesday.
This is a fundamental restructuring of the international trade environment in a way where the biggest market in the world has said, you're not going to cheat us anymore. We're going to have fair deals.
But the White House still has to defend the legality of Trump's tariffs in federal court. After a lower court ruled he overstepped his authority. The president wished his lawyers good luck with the big case today, writing, "If our country was not able to protect itself by using tariffs against tariffs, we would be dead with no chance of survival or success."
Okay, so I need to tell you about something massive that just happened because the Supreme Court has agreed to hear a challenge to one of Trump's most controversial executive orders. And lower courts have already said the order is unconstitutional. We are talking about Trump's attempt to end birthright citizenship, the constitutional guarantee that anyone born on American soil is automatically a citizen of the United States. Trump signed an executive order on January 20th, 2025, his very first day back in office, trying to eliminate this right for children of undocumented immigrants or temporary visitors. He wanted to redefine who counts as an American citizen based on the immigration status of their parents. And every single court that has looked at this order has said the same thing. It violates the 14th Amendment. It is unconstitutional. The president cannot just rewrite the Constitution through executive action. And now the Supreme Court is going to weigh in. They announced on December 5th, 2025, that they will hear oral arguments on this case in early 2026. And Trump is reportedly furious about the whole situation. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
All happening just hours before the president's next tariff hike takes effect at midnight for countries without trade deals. One of those is Canada, who could be slapped with a 35% tariff if a deal isn't made today.
We will agree a deal if there's one on the table that is in the best interest of Canadians.
As for Mexico, their 25% tariffs will stay in place after President Trump and Mexico's president agreed to a 90-day extension of trade talks. U.S. officials say they're also making progress on trade talks with China, but they have until August 12th before their pause on tariffs expires. In Washington, Rebecca Castor, Fox News.
Meantime, the Federal Reserve governors refused to lower their key interest rate, meaning your borrowing costs won't change for now. That decision is what analysts predicted, despite heavy pressure from President Trump to slash them. Chairman Jerome Powell says he remains focused on achieving mandate goals of maximum employment and stable prices for the benefit of the American people.
Let me explain why this matters so much, because birthright citizenship is not some obscure legal technicality. It is a fundamental part of what it means to be American. The 14th Amendment, ratified after the Civil War, says that all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens. Period. It does not say all persons born to citizen parents. It does not say all persons born to legal residents. It says all persons born in the United States. That language was chosen deliberately. The framers of the 14th Amendment wanted to make citizenship automatic and unconditional for anyone born on American soil. They wanted to prevent the government from creating classes of people who were born here but denied the rights of citizenship. And for over 150 years, that is how it has worked. If you are born in America, you are American. It does not matter where your parents came from. It does not matter what their immigration status is. Birth on American soil equals American citizenship. Trump wants to change that. His executive order says that children born to undocumented immigrants or people here on temporary visas are not birthright citizens. Even if they are born in a hospital in Texas or California or New York, even if they have never lived anywhere else, Trump says they are not really Americans. He wants to create a new category of people who are born here but denied citizenship based on who their parents are. And every court that has considered this order has said, no, you cannot do that. The Constitution is clear. The 14th Amendment means what it says. Birthright citizenship is a constitutional right that the president cannot eliminate through executive action. The lower courts have been emphatic about this. A district judge in New Hampshire issued a preliminary injunction blocking the order. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld that block in a 2-to-1 ruling, calling Trump's order invalid under the 14th Amendment. Nationwide injunctions have been issued preventing the order from being enforced anywhere in the country. Trump has lost at every level of the federal judiciary so far, and now he has to go to the Supreme Court, hoping that they will reverse all of those rulings and allow him to redefine American citizenship through presidential decree. Come on, are you kidding me right now? The president is trying to use an executive order to override a constitutional amendment. He is trying to eliminate a right that has existed for over 150 years. He is trying to create second-class people who are born in America but denied American citizenship. And the courts keep telling him, no, you cannot do that. The Constitution does not work that way. Presidential power has limits, and eliminating birthright citizenship is beyond those limits. But Trump keeps pushing. He keeps appealing. He keeps trying to find judges who will let him do what every other court has said is unconstitutional. And now the Supreme Court has agreed to hear the case, which means we are heading for a constitutional showdown that could reshape what it means to be American. Trump is reportedly furious about all of this. He expected his order to be implemented immediately. He expected courts to defer to presidential authority on immigration matters. He expected to transform American citizenship policy on day one of his second term. Instead, sir, he has spent the entire year fighting legal battles and losing. The order remains unenforceable. Children are still receiving birthright citizenship, and Trump's signature immigration policy has been blocked at every turn. All right, so let me take you deeper into what is happening here, because this case involves fundamental questions about the Constitution and presidential power that will have consequences for generations. The Supreme Court's decision to hear this case is significant not just because of the immediate policy implications, but because of what it says about how the court views its role in checking executive overreach. Let me walk you through the legal arguments on both sides, what the lower courts have said, and what might happen when the Supreme Court finally rules on this issue. Let me start with the constitutional text, because this is the foundation of everything. The 14th Amendment was ratified in 1868, 3 years after the end of the Civil War. It was designed to overturn the Dred Scott decision, the infamous Supreme Court ruling that had said black people could never be citizens of the United States. The framers of the 14th Amendment wanted to make citizenship clear and unambiguous. They wrote, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. That language was carefully chosen. It says all persons born in the United States. Not all persons born to citizen parents, not all persons born to legal residents, all persons born in the United States. The key phrase that Trump's lawyers are seizing on is subject to the jurisdiction thereof. They argue that children of undocumented immigrants are not really subject to the jurisdiction of the United States because their parents are here illegally. They claim that the framers of the 14th Amendment only intended birthright citizenship to apply to children of people who were legally present and fully subject to American law. And they argue that children of undocumented immigrants or temporary visitors fall outside that category. This is the legal theory behind Trump's executive order. He is not claiming the 14th Amendment does not exist. He is claiming it does not mean what everyone has thought it meant for 150 years. But here is the problem with that argument. Every court that has looked at it has rejected it. The lower courts have found that the phrase subject to the jurisdiction means subject to American law, meaning if you can be arrested, prosecuted, and punished under American law, you are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. And undocumented immigrants are absolutely subject to American law. They can be arrested, they can be deported, they can be prosecuted for crimes. They are not diplomats with immunity. They are not foreign soldiers operating under a different legal system. They are people living in the United States who are fully subject to American jurisdiction. And their children, born on American soil, are citizens under the plain language of the 14th Amendment. The Solicitor General, D. John Sauer, has made arguments to the Supreme Court that legal experts have called extreme and ahistorical. He has claimed that birthright citizenship, as currently understood, is a mistaken view that has caused destructive consequences. He has argued that the 14th Amendment was only intended to apply to freed slaves and their descendants, not to children of immigrants. He has asked the court to overturn more than a century of constitutional understanding and redefine who qualifies as an American citizen. These arguments are not subtle. They are asking the Supreme Court to radically reinterpret the Constitution in a way that would strip citizenship from millions of people who have always been considered Americans. The lower court rulings are important to understand because they show just how clearly unconstitutional Trump's order is. The district court in New Hampshire issued a preliminary injunction, meaning the judge found that the plaintiffs were likely to succeed on the merits of their case. That is a significant legal finding. Courts do not issue injunctions lightly. They have to be convinced that the people challenging the order have a strong case that is likely to win, and the judge found exactly that, concluding that Trump's order likely violates the 14th Amendment and should be blocked while the case proceeds. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld that injunction in a 2-to-1 ruling. The majority found that Trump's interpretation of the 14th Amendment is not supported by the text, the history, or the precedent. They noted that the Supreme Court addressed this exact issue back in 1898 in a case called United States versus Wong Kim Ark, where the court held that a child born in the United States to Chinese immigrant parents was a citizen under the 14th Amendment. That precedent has stood for over 125 years. It has been the basis for how citizenship has been administered in this country for generations. And the Ninth Circuit found that Trump's executive order is inconsistent with that precedent and with the constitutional text. The nationwide injunctions that have been issued are also significant. They mean that Trump's order cannot be enforced anywhere in the country, not just in the specific jurisdictions where the cases were filed. The Supreme Court has previously limited the scope of such injunctions in other cases, but in this instance, the lower courts found that complete nationwide relief was necessary to protect constitutional rights. Children are being born every day. If the order were allowed to take effect in some places but not others, you would have a chaotic situation where birthright citizenship existed in some states but not in others. The courts concluded that a uniform nationwide rule was essential. Now the Supreme Court has agreed to hear the case. Oral arguments are expected in early 2026, probably February or March. A final ruling may not come until June or July 2026. That means Trump's order will remain unenforceable for at least another 6 to 8 months, and possibly longer depending on how the court rules. This timeline is significant because it means the birthright citizenship question will be hanging over the 2026 midterm elections. Voters will go to the polls knowing that the Supreme Court is about to issue a ruling that could fundamentally change what it means to be American. That is an explosive political issue that could motivate turnout on both sides. Trump's fury about all of this is understandable from his perspective. He promised his supporters that he would end birthright citizenship. He signed the executive order on day one of his second term with great fanfare. He presented it as a done deal, a transformation of American immigration policy that would take effect immediately. Instead, he has spent the entire year watching courts block his order and explain why it is unconstitutional. His signature immigration policy has been tied up in litigation. The legal system has refused to simply defer to presidential authority. And now he has to wait for the Supreme Court, a court that he helped shape with his appointments, to decide whether his order is valid. Even if he ultimately wins, the delays have undermined his ability to claim immediate results. And if he loses, it will be one of the most significant defeats of his presidency. The stakes of this case extend far beyond Trump's political fortunes. If the Supreme Court upholds the lower court rulings, it will reaffirm that birthright citizenship is a constitutional right that cannot be eliminated by executive action. It will establish clear limits on presidential power over citizenship questions, and it will protect the status of millions of Americans who were born here but might be vulnerable under Trump's interpretation. But if the court reverses the lower courts, if they adopt Trump's narrow reading of the 14th Amendment, the consequences would be devastating. Millions of people who have always been considered citizens could suddenly find their status in question. Children born in the future to undocumented parents or temporary visitors would be denied citizenship at birth, and the fundamental principle that birth on American soil equals American citizenship would be overturned after more than 150 years. All right, so let me break this down into what it actually means and why you should care about it, because this case is going to affect every American, not just immigrants or their children. This is about what the Constitution means and whether a president can redefine constitutional rights through executive order. This is about whether the rule of law applies to the most powerful person in the country. And this is about what kind of nation we want to be. Let me give you the key takeaways from everything we have covered. Point number 1, every lower court has found Trump's order unconstitutional, and that is extremely significant. I want you to understand what it means when multiple courts at multiple levels all reach the same conclusion. The district court blocked the order. The appellate court upheld that block. Nationwide injunctions have been issued. Every judge who has looked at this order in depth has concluded that it violates the 14th Amendment. That is not a close call. That is not a split decision where reasonable people disagree. That is a unanimous rejection of Trump's legal theory by every court that has considered it. When courts are that unified, it usually means the constitutional question is not actually that difficult. Trump's order is clearly unconstitutional under existing law. The only question is whether the Supreme Court will change existing law to save it. Point number 2, the legal arguments Trump is making would require overturning 125 years of precedent. The Wong Kim Ark case from 1898 established that birthright citizenship applies to children of immigrants regardless of their parents' status. That precedent has been the foundation of American citizenship law for over a century. Millions of Americans trace their citizenship to that principle. If the Supreme Court adopts Trump's interpretation, they would have to overturn or substantially limit Wong Kim Ark. That is a huge step. Courts generally respect precedent. They do not casually overturn century-old rulings that have been relied upon by millions of people. The fact that Trump is asking them to do exactly that shows how radical his position is. Point number 3, the Supreme Court's decision to hear the case does not mean Trump will win. Some people might see the court's announcement and assume that they are going to side with Trump. That is not necessarily true. The Supreme Court agrees to hear cases for many reasons, not just because they want to reverse the lower courts. Sometimes they take cases to affirm important constitutional principles. Sometimes they take cases because the issues are so significant that they need Supreme Court resolution regardless of outcome. The fact that lower courts unanimously found Trump's order unconstitutional does not guarantee that the Supreme Court will disagree. They may well affirm those rulings and establish once and for all that birthright citizenship cannot be eliminated by executive action. Point number 4, the timing means this issue will dominate the 2026 midterm elections. With oral arguments in early 2026 and a decision expected in June or July, the birthright citizenship case will be front and center as Americans head to the polls. Immigration is always a hot-button issue in elections. But this case raises the stakes even higher. Voters will be asked to choose candidates knowing that the Supreme Court is about to rule on whether millions of people remain citizens or have their status stripped away. That is an incredibly emotional and divisive issue. It will motivate turnout, it will shape campaign messaging, and it will force candidates to take positions on one of the most fundamental questions in American law: who counts as American? Point number 5, Trump's fury reveals that he expected courts to simply defer to him, and they have not. Trump is angry because he thought he could transform American citizenship policy through executive decree. He expected the legal system to get out of his way. He assumed that courts would treat presidential authority on immigration as essentially unlimited, and every court has told him, no, there are limits. The Constitution establishes rights that even the president cannot override. Executive orders cannot rewrite constitutional amendments. Trump's fury is the fury of someone who believed he was above legal constraints and is discovering that he is not. That is a good thing for democracy. That is the legal system working as it should, but Trump clearly does not see it that way. Here's the bottom line. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear Trump's challenge to birthright citizenship, but every lower court has found his executive order unconstitutional. Trump signed the order on day 1 of his second term, trying to deny citizenship to children of undocumented immigrants or temporary visitors. The 14th Amendment says all persons born in the United States are citizens. Courts have consistently found that this language means what it says, that birthright citizenship is a constitutional right that the president cannot eliminate through executive action. Trump's lawyers are asking the Supreme Court to overturn 125 years of precedent and adopt a narrow interpretation that would strip citizenship from millions of people. The court will hear oral arguments in early 2026 with a decision expected by summer. Trump is reportedly furious about the delays and the legal losses. He expected his order to transform American immigration policy immediately. Instead, it has been blocked at every turn. The courts have refused to defer to presidential authority. The constitutional limits on executive power have been enforced. And now Trump has to wait, possibly until July 2026, to find out whether his signature immigration policy will survive judicial review. The stakes could not be higher. Birthright citizenship has been the law of the land for over 150 years. It has been the foundation of American identity. The idea that anyone born on this soil is American, regardless of where their parents came from. Trump wants to end that. He wants to create categories of people who are born here but denied citizenship based on their parents' immigration status. He wants to use executive power to override a constitutional amendment, and the Supreme Court is going to decide whether he can do that. If Trump wins, the consequences would be devastating. Millions of people who have always been considered citizens could have their status questioned. Children born in the future would be denied citizenship at birth based on circumstances beyond their control. The fundamental American principle that birth on our soil equals citizenship would be overturned. But if Trump loses, it will be a powerful reaffirmation that the Constitution means what it says, that presidential power has limits, that executive orders cannot override constitutional amendments, and that birthright citizenship remains a fundamental right for all persons born in the United States. The constitutional showdown is coming. The lower courts have unanimously ruled against Trump. The legal arguments he is making are extreme and would require overturning century-old precedent. But the Supreme Court has agreed to hear the case. And with a conservative majority that Trump helped create, nothing is certain. This is one of the most important constitutional cases in a generation, and the outcome will define what it means to be American for decades to come. Trump wanted to end birthright citizenship with the stroke of a pen. The courts have told him, no, the Constitution is not that easy to change. Presidential decrees cannot override constitutional amendments, and the fundamental rights established by the 14th Amendment cannot be eliminated just because the president wants them gone. That is the rule of law in action. That is the legal system checking executive overreach. And that is why Trump is so furious, because he is discovering that even the president has to follow the Constitution. The Supreme Court will have the final word. We will find out in 2026 whether they agree with every lower court that has looked at this issue, or whether they are willing to overturn 150 years of constitutional understanding to give Trump what he wants. The stakes are enormous, the consequences are real, and every American should be paying attention to what happens next. All right, that is what I have got for you today. This case is going to be one of the biggest Supreme Court decisions in years, and there will be a lot more to cover as it develops. Make sure you are subscribed and you have notifications turned on, because oral arguments are coming in early 2026, and you are going to want to follow every development. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think. Should the Supreme Court uphold birthright citizenship? Do you think Trump will win this case? I want to hear from you, and I will see you in the next one.